In a few previous episodes, I've touched on fan accusations of bias toward a few different franchises in Smash. This time, though, I'm going to talk about one that people are saying Sakurai has something against. So, what's the deal with Smash Bros. And Donkey Kong? DK has built up one hell of a reputation over 30 plus years. He's gone from his arcade debut, his ancestors' arcade debut, to two sets of legendary 2D platformers and a surprising amount of spin-offs and cameos, as well as a 1990s CG cartoon that is, dated. According to the VG Sales Wiki, the Donkey Kong franchise is actually Nintendo's fifth biggest, with 56.1 million total copies sold across every game featuring the Kong clan. The cartoony art style, weighty physics, and generally challenging nature of the platformers have made them particularly popular among Western gamers, though there are plenty of DK fans worldwide. And yet, we haven't seen a whole lot of that transfer into Smash, with just 2 characters, 6 stages, and a collection of trophies. This is where the bias talk comes in. With so many people clamoring for more content from the series, it was only a matter of time before some of them started assuming Sakurai must have some kind of personal vendetta. They look at the lack of variety in the stages and music, jungle themes and remixes of the DK Island Swing only go so far, or the lack of a certain someone who has one hell of a bandwagon, and decide it must be because Sakurai just doesn't care. As you probably guessed if you know me by now, it's not that simple. There seem to be a handful of reasons why Donkey Kong has gotten shafted in Smash. The series was pretty dormant around Brawl's development. Diddy only got the nod because he was one of the only Kongs still consistently doing anything in the few spin-offs. Then when Donkey Kong Country Returns came out and, returned the franchise to the spotlight, DK and Diddy were the only playable characters. That was remedied a few years later in Tropical Freeze, but it might have been in development just a little too late to factor into Smash 4's content. Or maybe the distance or language barrier made communication during development too hard and impractical. While there's some gray area here, it's much more complicated than proclaiming that Sakurai hates the Kongs because they aren't Japanese characters and breaking out the torches and pitchforks. But our challenger today might be able to fly right over all of it. The timing might be just right this time around to land that chance. Or she might not even need timing at all. The girl with the world, Dixie Kong, is a member of the Kong clan and Diddy's girlfriend and partner on his adventures. Her debut came in Donkey Kong Country 2, where she insisted on going with Diddy to rescue DK from the Kremlin's clutches because 2 Kongs together stood a much better chance than one. It's often considered the best game in the franchise and a pinnacle of 2D platforming in the 1990s, in no small part to how well Dixie and Diddy complement each other. Throwing stereotypes out the window as easily as she throws a barrel, Dixie proved to be every bit as competent as the other Kongs, quickly becoming a fan favorite and even getting the starring role in the 3rd entry a year later. But it's her signature ability that helped her stand out. Of all things, prehensile hair. Using full control of her ponytail to attack, pick things up, and spin it like a propeller to slow her descent in the air or even glide. She's also learned to do new things with it over time. When Diddy took the hovering niche in Tropical Freeze with his rocket barrel pack, Dixie found her own thing by reworking her helicopter spin to function as a double jump instead. To say no less of her other talents. She plays the guitar in her spare time, and she's actually pretty damn good at it. I've heard people dismiss her chances before and assume she'd be a clone of Diddy, but all of this proves she has a lot going on to ensure she'd make more sense as a unique addition to the roster. At the very least, she'd be no worse than Luigi, with a few similar moves to Diddy, but many attacks and quirks that are all her own. Dixie also finds herself in a weird situation, because she's actually been considered for Smash once before. Those of you who've heard about the Forbidden 7 know that there was unused data in Brawl's code suggesting 7 characters who were planned or at least considered at one point but didn't make it in. And Dixie was one of them. In fact, she was actually going to be part of a tag team mechanic with Diddy, swapping between the 2 Kongs like in Donkey Kong Country 2 with what would function as a moveset transformation. But alas, it didn't end up happening, and Dixie was left waiting. But it does mean the Smash developers and Sakurai are aware of her, and see her as someone who can make it in. And now these rumblings of a Smash 4.5 on the Switch offer a second chance. and in one of a few different ways. For starters, she could get in due to being relevant. Tropical Freeze dropped in 2014, and if Shulk is anything to go by, that's close enough. Or, on the chance that Sakurai isn't involved in this project and the team sticks to characters who missed the initial cut of the 3DS and Wii U versions, Dixie could have easily been one of the characters left on the cutting room floor. Or, just maybe, they'll be pulling more characters from the Smash Ballot. While Dixie didn't have a massive bandwagon, she has a strong fan following nonetheless, and having been considered for a past Smash game might be enough to give her the edge. Just like all the different ways she could traverse levels in her home series, Dixie Kong has multiple ways to join the fight, and to succeed, she only needs one of them to work in her favor. If one of those opportunities did come to pass, what would Dixie Kong be like in Smash? We want Dixie's overall feel to be similar to how she plays in her home series while also reflecting her character as a whole. She can do some weird stuff for a character in a platformer, and yet once you get the hang of how her abilities work, you can breeze through levels in record time like it's second nature. Her concept in Smash should feel the same way, with unusual properties to her kit that make her an unconventional fighter, but one whose movement feels fluid and natural in the hands of an expert. Dixie's appearance has been pretty consistent over time, with only minor changes to her look since 1995. Over time, she's ditched her old leg warmers, swapped her original gold earrings for larger blue ones, and gotten rid of the Rareware logo on her beret for obvious reasons. Considering Smash 4's tendency to favor modern and updated designs, we have reason to believe they'd give Dixie her modern look as well. By the way, props to the Smashify team for taking that into account when they made this art for her. We have a few things to look at when considering alternate colors as well. The first that come to mind are the palette swaps used in Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 for their two-player contest mode. I'm not sure which of the two they'd prefer. It'd depend on whether they want to change her hair color or not. DK King of Swing also gave her 3 more alts in its multiplayer mode. As with before, they could use the entire palette, or just change the color of her clothes and leave her hair alone. Finally, there's also the option to give her an alt using either of the palettes Kiddy Kong uses in Donkey Kong Country 3, or something inspired by Tiny Kong, her allegedly younger sister. Moving on, Dixie Kong's details and stats would help us paint a picture of how she would move and act in battle. Dixie's playstyle would best be designed to combine mid-range footsies with a strong grab game and follow-ups. Her hair would give her the means to poke at opponents in neutral and outrange a lot of hand-to-hand fighters. Being a grappler makes perfect sense when you're always picking up objects and throwing them in Donkey Kong games, but since Dixie holds stuff with her hair, she'd have an unusual niche of being a grappler character with a ranged grab. I'd imagine the range and frame data on it would be pretty close to how Lucas's grab behaves. So, fun fact. In Donkey Kong Country 2, Dixie's mobility overall is a little slower than Diddy's. That's something we can carry over into Smash, with grounded movement that's worse than his but still above average overall. I actually made her airspeed slightly faster than Diddy's is, since his is unusually low and based on propelling himself around with monkey flip when necessary. Making Dixie a little more aerodynamic and having her fall slower gives her a greater ability to fight in the air, which is something that fits her skill set. Then as for Dixie's weight, I made her a few points lighter than Diddy, not just because of her slightly lighter build, but also because I kinda see the Switch version having more balance patches, and I bet one way they nerf Diddy is gonna be taking a point or two off his weight. Then there's a little thing I want to give her as a way to implement one of her helicopter moves. I touched on how in Tropical Freeze she spins her ponytail to basically perform a double jump. How about we have her second jump here do the same thing? The helicopter jump would be a high double jump with a delay, comparable in function to the floaty double jumps performed by Ness, Lucas, and Mewtwo. This would aid Dixie's recovery and give her greater means to juggle opponents high up near the ceiling, but the startup on it would also make jumping out of combos and strings a lot tougher. It has a mix of pros and cons, and her players would need to learn how to best utilize it. With her looks and stats figured out, now let's go into what Dixie Kong's moveset could end up looking like. As I mentioned before, she could have a few moves that feel similar to Diddy's. They have similar builds, and since they're in a relationship, they've probably learned a few things from each other, but the majority of Dixie's attacks would be unique to her and take advantage of her own talents. So let's start with the obvious thing. She'd have quite a few attacks using her hair, taking advantage of the range it affords her and its disjointed properties. Her forward tilt could be a standard forward flick reminiscent of her ground attack in the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, and her up tilt could be the same concept but applied overhead instead. Her forward smash could be an exaggerated version of this attack, having her wind up and then spin and swing her ponytail forward rapidly for 3 hits total, and her down smash could come straight from her ground pound attack in Tropical Freeze. Then Dixie could work her hair into her aerial game by grabbing her ponytail by the end and performing a front flip for her neutral air, turning around and swinging it behind her for her back air, and flipping and slamming it downward for her down air, a surprisingly fast spike that hit around frame 10 or so, but in exchange it wouldn't be very strong. Then of course there's her grab game, where she'd hold her victim above her just like a barrel in the original trilogy, squeeze them for her pummel, and fling them for her throws, with her forward and up throws taking their animations straight from Country 2 and 3. But if we made all of Dixie's attacks use her hair, it'd be boring. So here's some ideas for non-hair moves. Her jab could be a plucky 1-2 punch followed by a powerful slap since she can't mimic Diddy using his tail for her rapid jab. Her down tilt could also be similar to his, but with an arm sweep instead of a clap and altered knockback and end lag to make it harder to follow up with. She is based on footsies after all, so her closer range attacks would be less reliable for that kind of thing. Her dash attack could be her pirouette attack from Tropical Freeze. And her up smash could have her flip over onto a handstand to pop opponents upward, then kick straight up into them. Worth mentioning that most of these moves wouldn't hit very hard. You see, in both Mario Baseball spin-offs, Dixie has among the worst power on both rosters, slightly worse than even Diddy's. If that's any precedent, her damage output would be on the low side. And then there's some miscellaneous details that add to her personality. Idle animations could come from blowing a bubble in the SNES games, and playing air guitar in Tropical Freeze. And one of her taunts could have her whip out her real guitar and play a quick riff. Though probably the newer one she has in Tropical Freeze rather than the one from Donkey Kong Country 2. But we've got 4 more big secrets left to find. What could Dixie Kong's special moves be? Dixie's neutral special could actually pull from something relatively new, the gumball gun. Scratching your head? In Tropical Freeze, if you play as her as player 2 or in hard mode, and you press X or Y in the air, she shoots a bouncing gumball projectile. Most enemies that get hit by it get stunned, making it easier to defeat them. Gumball gun would work similar to Diddy's Peanut Pop gun in design, a single charge and release projectile whose charge cannot be stored. Unlike the Peanuts though, these gumballs would bounce along the ground after they're shot, lasting 2 bounces and falling apart the 3rd time they hit a surface. Holding the charge would make the gumball shot travel faster and therefore go further, as well as making it deal a little more damage. Hitting your opponent with it would stun them for about half a second, not nearly as long as in Tropical Freeze for obvious balancing reasons. It's an unusual fireball type projectile, but it's got its niche. The brief stun could still give you basic follow-ups and maybe a grab if you're close by, and it could set your teammate up in doubles and generally be annoying as hell at throwing off your opponent's timing if they get hit. Don't worry, Dixie's side special is something a little more familiar, the helicopter spin. You didn't think I forgot about it, did you? I've seen Moveset stick this in as her up special, but since it's purely for horizontal movement in the original trilogy, it makes more sense to work it in as a hurricane kick style move at side. On use, Dixie spins and propels herself forward. If you're in the air, it slows your fall down significantly. It cover nice distance overall, but only deal minor damage. So what makes it so special? Well, you know how easily Dixie can turn around when spinning in the games? How about we bring that into Smash by allowing her to turn around once as a way to bail out if things look bad. Just be careful using it to approach or recover, of course, since turning around would cut the remaining distance you could go in half and increase your end lag. Use with caution. But if used well, helicopter spin would be useful for the same things it is in DKC 2 and 3, as a means of covering aerial distance, to get around her normally slow airspeed just like Diddy does with Monkey Flip, and getting out from above pits or sure death. Between this and her high double jump and decent landing tools, Dixie would actually prefer to recover high. But what happens if you're stuck low and have no choice? Well, that's where Dixie's backup option comes in, Squawks the Parrot. The only animal buddy in the series to pop up in every main platformer in some fashion, Squawks has played a lot of roles over the years, but in Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3, he flies the Kongs around, and that's exactly how he'd pitch in here. On use, Squawks would poof in at Dixie's position and start carrying her to safety with his talons by flying diagonally upward. He can't spit eggs here, but he would deal contact damage to opponents, and mashing A or B would have him flap his wings faster to carry Dixie further. That said, he wouldn't deal much damage, wouldn't cover Dixie's hurt box from the sides or below, and the distance he'd go would be comparable to Duck Hunt's recovery if you don't button mash, and only 1.5 times that at the maximum. Yeah, it's not all that useful as a recovery move, and that's on purpose. Did you know Squawks actually travels slower when he's lugging a Kong around than when you use a barrel to turn into him? He's there if Dixie needs him, but only as a fallback option. If possible, she'd prefer to be higher up and use her hair to recover instead. But what the hell does that leave us with for her down special? Well, there is something we haven't been utilizing much, so how about we have Dixie whip out her guitar and play a power chord? Another charge and release move and another you can't store the charge of. She'd build power in her guitar, don't ask how, then unleash a semicircular wave of sound above and to her sides. The sound wave would grow in size with the charge, going from range equal to Toon Link's sword uncharged to rivaling Ike's reach when she takes the full 3 seconds to crank it up to 11. At lower charges, it'd be a weak wind box pushing opponents upward and also slightly diagonally on the sides, but from a half charge on, it becomes stronger looking and start dealing damage and outward knockback instead. Power chord would take different forms depending on its charge, but its main use would always be to maintain space and give your enemies a real headache. It's also a nice edge guarding tool against characters who don't snap to the ledge very well, or on anyone trying to come in from the side. If you can somehow connect with a fully charged blast, it's the strongest move in Dixie's arsenal. Well, okay, there's one that's stronger, but what do you expect no less from a final smash? This one took a long time for me to figure out, but I decided on letting another animal buddy have time to shine, with Rambi Rampage. The Rhino is an icon of Donkey Kong Country, every game but the third anyway, and what better way to give him a chance to wreak havoc? With Smash Ball in hand, one of Rambi's crates would appear at Dixie's side and she'd bust him free and climb onto his back. This final smash would work kinda like the Landmaster or Rocket Barrel Barrage, in being transformation based but having limited inputs. The only attacks you'd need are a powerful swing of Rambi's horn with A, and holding and letting go of B to prepare and unleash a devastating charge. Dixie would gain significant boost to her mobility while riding Rambi, and she could still jump and even double jump to chase anyone who tried to escape to the air. Be careful though, because you're not entirely an unstoppable juggernaut. While you wouldn't take any damage, each hit would shorten the time the final smash lasts, and when you start off only getting about 13.5 seconds, it could add up in free-for-alls. Also, you lose access to your other moves during it, specials included. Take care not to chase anyone too far off stage, or you might find yourself unable to recover. But take care to have solid ground beneath your feet, and you could use Rambi to bowl over anyone in your path. This is what Dixie Kong could bring to Smash. Spinning into action with her own unusual take on her playstyle, her prehensile hair gives her range and unique movement options to poke at opponents, land grabs, and build damage. With effective footsies and grab follow-ups, a multifaceted recovery that ensures she doesn't die off stage easily, and a distinct double jump that gives her great height, she wears her opponents down while ensuring she stays in the fight with good mobility that can feel like poetry in motion once you understand how to use it. But opponents should take care to exploit her low damage output, reliance on being at hair's length, slow grabs she must use for optimal conversions, and the fact that she's easy to rack up damage on off stage when forced to rely on her up special. Dixie may not make a lot of waves in speculation, but she's been a consistent presence in the Donkey Kong series for over 20 years now and doesn't have many people who dislike her. She has multiple ways to join the fight, whether in the rumored Switch port or in Smash sequels in the future. She's just a cool character overall. Thanks to Nathaniel Platier, hope I pronounced that right, for allowing me access to the music he creates over on his channel. If the piece that played during Dixie's bio sounded familiar, that's because he wrote it for her Smashified video. Speaking of which, thanks also to the Smashified team for making the render you see here. Who knows who they'll recreate in Smash's style next. And a real quick shout out to everyone who supported me on Patreon so far. You guys are awesome, and you're putting me one step closer to making a difficult situation more bearable. We're going to shift gears a little for our next challenger. I've gone over a few characters now who I think are flying under the radar, But next episode, we're going to go over a character I think is being overrated. I want to clear things up about them while also showing why they could still work in Smash. So, see you then. Now where's that bonus barrel I keep missing?